are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke McKenna, but today's case is about Michelle von Emster. Was this murder or a shark attack? When the easiest answer doesn't quite make sense, do you ignore the inconsistencies or do you dive deeper for the truth? When there are such strange suspects, do you decide to not worry about a full investigation? Well, in this case, that's exactly what they did. I also want to thank our longtime sponsor, which is Magellan TV. I will never get over how many incredible, amazing documentaries they have on their streaming service. I mean, I have watched so many at this point, and I just feel like there are so many that you can't find anywhere else, that it makes it so worthwhile. But one that I watched recently was actually my favorite. It was called War on Witches, and it's a story of a brutal witch hunt in Europe 100 years prior to the Salem witch trials. Thousands of women were tortured and burnt at the stake for what King James believed to be witchcraft that was aimed at killing him. But if this isn't something that interests you like it interests me, then I guarantee you there's a documentary on Magellan TV that you will love. They have so many, I mean, look at all these different genres. So many to choose from, and so many within those categories. But if you would like to try this out and you can get a free 1-month trial, all you have to do is go to try.magellantv.com/Brooke McKenna or click the link down below and you get a 1-month free trial. So thank you to Magellan for sponsoring this portion of the video. And if you don't know, it is my absolute passion to tell these stories. I mean no harm or disrespect when I do so. And this month is actually Foul Play February, so I'm going to be posting so much content like this on Thursdays and Sundays. Everything foul play, true crime, and so you really don't want to miss out. Now let's get back to the story.
Something else must be driving great whites to attack. And maybe it isn't what they're hunting, but what's hunting them.
So it was 1994 in California, and Michelle von Emster lived in San Diego. She was a 25-year-old born in 1968 and had grown up just outside of San Francisco with 4 siblings. They were all girls as well, and Michelle did well in school. She even went to St. Mary's College for a bit. She was excited, as most teens are, to go away, but soon after, everything for her would change. This is when she was actually diagnosed with cancer. Now, Michelle didn't let this keep her down. She was a fighter. She was so incredibly strong, and a year later, she was cancer-free. But by this point, it had already kind of derailed her studies, and so she decided to go and celebrate her strength and her fight, and to be able to basically just let go of that past year and be free. So she decided to go to San Diego. That's where she would rent a house in Loma Portal, which overlooked the bay. She stayed there for a while, and she also rented a home in Ocean Beach as well. She was known to basically be a walking contradiction, and she was a woman who could be such a party girl that never slowed down, as well as someone who meditated every day on the beach and was so, involved with their soul and working with their inner being and their health. And she'd also recently gotten a butterfly tattoo on her right shoulder, and this just kind of signified that she wanted to be free. It seemed to me that she was kind of balancing wanting to take her life back after something so traumatic had happened to her, and she wanted to live the life that she dreamed. No one is one-sided, especially when you're in your 20s and you're growing up. She was also very interested in art. She had lots of friends, and she was just an overall incredible human who was trying her best to be happy. But on April 14th, no one knew what happened to her, because that night she had gone out with her roommate named Coco Campbell, and they were really good friends. And that night they had gotten tickets for a Pink Floyd concert for their Division Bell tour, and they were so excited to go. This was at the Jack Murphy Stadium, and they were getting ready. They got in the car, they drove there, and then they were turned away. Unfortunately, they had bought the wrong tickets, and so they could not get in, and they had to just drive home, and they were so upset about this. But on the drive home, Michelle actually looked at Coco and said she didn't want to go home yet. She wanted to go to the ocean. And so Coco dropped her off at a pier, which was about 6 blocks from their home, so it was easy for her to just walk home. So Coco decided to go ahead and go back to the house, and Michelle stayed at this pier. She loved the water, and so she was just going to, spend some time there before walking home. But this was around 8 p.m. and hours went by and she wasn't returning to the house. Coco had no idea what happened to her. She only knew that she was wearing a green trench coat and she had her purse that night. However, it wasn't long after this that those items were found, as well as Michelle. But nobody who knew her knew that just yet. You see, the next afternoon, 2 surfers named David Correa and William Dostal went out for a swim in the pretty much vacant water at the Sunset Cliffs Natural Park and Beach. This was about 10 minutes away from Ocean Beach, where Michelle lived. Now, they would call for help at 3:18 p.m. because they had seen some seagulls swarming this certain area, and they had walked over and they found a woman's body bobbing up and down in the water. They could not tell really how to identify her because she was so injured and there was no identification on her. She wasn't even wearing clothes. She was completely naked besides some jewelry. She had a few bracelets and a few rings, and that was pretty much it. She was then taken to the San Diego lifeguard headquarters, and they found that she had a butterfly tattoo on her right shoulder. She was also about in her 20s, they believed, and had long brown hair. This girl, who they were calling Jane Doe for the meantime, had injuries all over her body. Her eyes were also wide open when she was found. Now, everyone thought, upon first glance, that this was a shark attack. And medical examiner Robert Engel had found that she hadn't been in the water long. She had large wounds with missing tissue. She also had her right leg up to her thigh was missing as well. Now, he reported that her death was unknown, but he did believe it was a shark attack. However, the next medical examiner who looked at her, named Brian Blackburn, claimed that this Jane Doe had also had a broken neck, broken ribs, broken pelvis, cuts to her face and torso. But the most heartbreaking part was the fact that she had sand in her lungs, in her throat, and her stomach. And this meant that she was alive when all of this happened to her, enough to take in that big gulp of air, or water and sand. Her official cause of death was written as a great white shark attack. And after that, it appeared that blue sharks then began to attack her and bite her after her death. The case didn't seem suspicious to the people looking into her body, and they believed she went out swimming the night prior and that she was attacked. And it appeared to examiners that this was an open and shut case, and they were done with it as soon as they identified her.
Great whites are the most feared predator in the ocean. They typically hunt large mammals, like seals, sea lions, and whales. But they are also responsible for more attacks on humans than any other shark species.
Except the fact that medical examiner Brian Blackburn didn't know what a shark attack victim looked like. He had never worked with one, ever. He didn't know what they would appear to be. He wouldn't know what their wounds would resemble, and no one who had ever worked with a shark attack victim looked at her body. You see, Brian did reach out to different experts, especially at the Scripps Institute of Oceanography, to get their opinion, but he only asked questions and didn't let them see photos. And so after talking to them, they were like, oh yeah, that seems pretty much like a likely theory. And so to him, that was the answer, and that was it. But when the news first broke of this Jane Doe and a shark attack, a woman came forward with information. It was a woman named Denise Knox, who worked and owned at Cabrillo Stationery and Office Supply, and she said she had an employee that matched that description who hadn't been to work the past 2 days. Now, at first, no one believed Denise because they had so many calls coming in saying, oh, it could be this girl, it could be this girl, but Denise was asked all of these questions, and she was finally asked, "Does Michelle shave under her arms or her legs?" And Denise said no. And so they asked her to come down and look at the body. Denise couldn't go in and see her, but they took a picture of the face and they showed Denise, and Denise confirmed that it was Michelle. Denise said she looked so peaceful and that it was odd. When she was identified, of course, her roommate Coco was told about this, and Coco was telling everybody that she dropped her off that night, and it seemed to basically solidify their theory that she just went swimming, and that's what happened to her. That she must have been, depressed after not getting into the concert. She wanted to be alone, and that she eventually decided to take a dip in the ocean, and that's when she met her tragic fate. Even shark experts had said that that was more than likely the case. Yet, like I said, no one had seen her body. And reporters began grasping at this story. They wanted to know if sharks were in the area, if people should be more careful, if people should stay out of the water. That wasn't the problem here. The problem was that this girl could have a completely wrong cause of death on her death certificate. You see, there were many things that just didn't add up here. The first was that no one in their right mind would take a swim in this freezing cold water that it would have been the night that Michelle would have been attacked in the water. It was absolutely freezing at 59 degrees, and her clothes were off. There was no even shreds of fabric on her body. So did this mean that she skinny dipped in freezing cold water all by herself? This didn't seem impossible, but it didn't seem like something that everyone would do. But that's when shark expert named Ralph Collier, who runs the Global Shark Attack file, then retracted his statement. You see, he was the shark expert that told the medical examiners, yeah, that sounds about right from what you're telling me. He then retracted everything he said because he then saw autopsy photos of her body. He said that it was very unlikely that this was a shark attack, all because of her wounds. He said, "One of the things that struck me was the condition of the limb," which was her missing leg. "When a white shark bites off part of the limb, the break is clean, almost like you put it on a table saw. What remained of Michelle's femur was anything but. It looked like what happened when you get a piece of bamboo and whittle it down to a point with a knife. The bone came to a point. This type of injury is caused when a bone is twisted under a great deal of force. I've looked at close to 100 photos of cases that I have reviewed over the years, and I've never seen any bones that came to a point." He also said that if a shark had come and ripped her leg off, she would have died of blood loss instantly, which doesn't match up to the fact that she had taken a big enough gulp to ingest sand into her stomach. He also said that there was the fact that there was bruising on her face, and there was also broken bones all over her body, which didn't match shark attacks. Another expert said that the bite marks on her were too small for a shark that would have killed her. They could have been the blue sharks eating her body, but it wasn't big enough for a white shark to have done it. And the blue sharks wouldn't have caused her death. Only a great white shark would be able to take off her limb in one go. More experts were weighing in, saying that there was no puncture wounds, there was no teeth left behind as there often is. It was also said that great white sharks don't hunt at night, that they have light activated retinas, so basically they come up from the bottom and aim for a silhouette that is made from the sun. On top of all of that, it was very rare for shark attacks to happen in this area. In fact, there had only been 2 in a century. And even one of those victims, they weren't sure. I mean, there was a witness statement that this is what happened, but they never found the body to confirm this was a shark attack. This was actually a man named Robert Pamperin, who was 33 years old. He had gone free diving at Alligator Head, La Jolla Cove in California with a friend named Gerald Leather. And this was in 1959, so this was 35 years prior. He was actually out about 30 meters from the shore with his friend, and he had a mask, a snorkel, some fins, and Gerald suddenly heard Robert screaming, "Help me." He looked back and he saw Robert kind of go up out of the water and then suddenly disappear. When Gerald dived down, he said that he saw Robert in the mouth of a great white shark. and that he began diving towards him, trying to create a distraction for the shark to let him go, but it appeared that the shark was trying to swallow Robert whole, and there was nothing more he could do. So he went to shore and he got the Coast Guard, and they searched for his body, and they found nothing but a single fin. The next year, divers would find a skeleton which they believed to be Robert, but as horrific as this was, it was one of those tragedies that didn't happen often, and you would have never expected it to either. But this case with Michelle was as far as over, as the examiners were concerned. There might not have been anything to prove that it was a shark, but there also wasn't anything to prove that it wasn't. And Emmy Bryan Blackmore said, if it wasn't a white shark, then what was it? And some had a theory for this that was much more sinister. They wondered if Michelle Emster had been murdered. Rumors flew that possibly she was pushed to her death off the cliff. Maybe she was hit by a car and then dumped in the water. Some said she could have overdosed and fallen in, and some others said she could have been swimming, run over by a boat, or she took her own life. But that's when a story came out that seemed to hold the most truth. You see, she had previously worked at a coffee shop called Rumors, and she had left that job because she feared that she had a stalker. She never said this man's name because she didn't know his name, but she said that he rode a motorcycle and that he was always following her. And one of her coworkers who worked with her at the coffee shop said that she was soft and warm and intelligent with a hippie vibe. To this day, no one knows who this stalker was or if they could be connected at all. It seems like they wanted to be unknown for whatever reason, and that could have been the answer to what happened here. Michelle's whole story also was not being helped by the loads of information that people were giving. Her friends were spewing different things about her. People who just kind of knew her were talking about her, and one would say something about her, then someone would say something contradicting that statement, and so nobody could really get to the core of who Michelle was and if these behaviors were strange for her, if she would have done certain things. That can really help in an investigation, but there was literally no way to know how she really was, or if she was different with all of these people, and she just had that kind of personality that could mesh with anybody and could be one way and then be the other the next minute. Some friends even said she loved the water. However, others said she feared the ocean. These were vastly different stories, especially when she was found in the water, nude. That was another thing that investigators were very confused about, and the public was very confused about. Why this girl was found completely nude with not even a shred of clothes on her body. But one man who didn't want to be named claimed that he knew that she loved the ocean. You see, he had seen her before she was in the news because he was a lifeguard at this beach, and he said that a year prior in October that he had been watching the ocean and that he saw this girl swimming too far out. And she seemed fine, so he just kind of went in the water a little bit to make sure she was okay. She was wearing a wetsuit at first, and he said that he started swimming out to her. He asked her, what she was doing, if everything was okay, and he said the cold water really didn't seem to affect her even though he was freezing, and she was also topless. They talked for a few minutes, everything seemed normal, but the lifeguard did notice a strange man swimming kind of around her, not necessarily with her, but he also believed he was kind of more of a military guy due to his haircut. Now, this story did point to Michelle liking to swim in the cold as well as liking to swim nude. And so this made a lot more sense, but it didn't point to a shark attack. The other biggest theory was the possibility that a boat had come by as she was swimming too far out and hadn't seen her and basically drove over her, and she possibly got caught in the propeller, which is the reason that her leg was cut off how it was and that she drowned. Now, the shark expert that we talked about said that a boat propeller could have done this to her leg. However, it still doesn't make sense as to why sand would have been in her stomach, unless possibly she was flipped upside down by this propeller and, they weren't that deep when she maybe hit her head on the ground and ingested some sand. But even then, that theory just seems so far out there. It's just said that sand in the lungs is not normally consistent with drowning because drowning victims are trying to get up. They're not necessarily at the bottom of the water. But you didn't think I was going to leave you without suspects, did you? You see, investigators had a few of those, and one was a man who had given Michelle's old boss, Denise Knox, Michelle's autopsy report. This was a man that came into the office supply store that Michelle had worked at after her death, and he started making copies of this paper, and he just kept coming back to make these copies. So finally Denise took one of them, and she realized this was Michelle's autopsy. And on the last page, he had written, "Blue sharks? Bullshit." This guy was very strange, and Denise found it even more eerie when she looked outside and noticed he rode a motorcycle. She didn't know his name. She still didn't know who this man was. But could this have been Michelle's stalker? Was he upset that everyone blamed the sharks instead of giving him praise for her murder? Who was this man? Nobody knew, or nobody wants to admit to knowing. But there was another strange man in Michelle's life, and that was a man named Edwin Decker, a man who said that the night before her murder, he had gone on a date with Michelle. You see, it was said that Edwin worked at the bar that was next to the store she worked at, and that he had been flirting with her for weeks, and she finally said that she would get drinks with him. And so they went to Winston's bar and got a few drinks, and then they decided to leave. They had a 12-pack of beer, some cigarettes, and they were walking back to Edwin's home. However, Edwin then said that a car drove up to them while they were walking, and they noticed that it was the bouncer from Winston's, the bar they had just been at, and that he was crying. He was supposed to be working as well, and he said that this man was crying and saying that he had just been fired. He said that shortly after, Edwin and Michelle had left, this man had come to the door, started banging on the door, and ripped it off its hinges. He was screaming, and the bouncer was fired because this man was able to get into the bar and to rip the door off the hinges, and that was the bouncer's job, was to make sure people didn't do that. But this man was so distraught and so upset, and so he asked if he could join them that night and drink with them. And so Edwin and Michelle said, yeah, that's fine. And so the three went back to Edwin's house, and they began to drink all night long, till dawn. The doorman kept falling asleep, Edwin said, and he would wake up and he would say, I gotta go to work. But he was so drunk that he just fell back asleep. But him and Michelle, Edwin and Michelle, they would, kiss, and they would do some things, and he said they were having a good time. But around 5 a.m., Michelle left for her home, and Edwin said he never saw her again. He said there was a total intellectual connection. I felt there was an emotional connection too, at least on my part there was. And we also had a physical connection. I was so bummed when a couple days went by and she hadn't called. I was about to give up on the idea. But that's when he said he saw the news and realized she was dead. Now, instead of contacting the police, this is where he got weird, because he wrote a poem that he put on the internet, and it said, the report said there was a tattoo, a butterfly on her shoulder, which I remembered that night on my couch when I, like the shark, chewed on her lips and took off her shirt. Needless to say, this was disturbing for everyone who knew her and everyone involved in this case, and the fact that he was comparing himself to something that could have killed her made people question him. However, Edwin ever since then has pushed for her case to be reopened, and he believes it wasn't a shark accident either. So he's either a very manipulative person who is good at making people believe that he cares, or if he wants recognition for himself when they catch him, or he genuinely didn't do this and just made a weird poem about it. Also, people wondered if someone had killed Michelle, why her purse and everything in it was found on the beach, like she had left it there, because it was near the pier where she had been dropped off by Coco. And her purse contained her driver's license, her keys, her cigarettes, a pay stub, and makeup. There was also $27 inside that hadn't been stolen. And the only thing that wasn't recovered was her trench coat and her clothes, which I'm not sure what clothes she was wearing. No one ever really specified that. But I assume since she was going to a concert, she would have been in clothes, and those were never ever found, and no trace of them were on her body as well. Who would have killed her? And why? It was obviously not for money. But was it due to rejection? Maybe her stalker didn't like seeing her on a date with another man and got upset? Maybe he was the one banging on the door at the bar, believing that they were still inside, and was so angry and wanted in. If he was capable of taking the door off the hinges, I can't imagine what he would do to a woman he was angry at. Now, like I said, Edwin did help in furthering this case the best he could. He actually met with a journalist who wanted more information on this case, and they went to a medical examiner begging him to reopen the case. They said, "Dear Dr. Wagner, we are writing to ask you to take another look at the accidental death finding in the case of Michelle von Emster. We are writers with special interest in the von Emster case. One of us dated Michelle briefly before her death, and the other investigated the case for a story published in Boating magazine in 1994. We believe Dr. Brian Blackburn, a previous coroner, conclusions may have been biased because others in the community rushed to judgment about this being a white shark attack." But in 2008, 14 years after her death, that's exactly what happened. The medical examiner Glenn Wagner re-examined her case. He confirmed that Michelle had died prior to sharks biting her. However, he couldn't change her death certificate or reopen the case with no evidence. The file on this case has been destroyed since, because that is the police department's policy after 7 years to get rid of it. So her death is officially ruled as a shark attack, but many believe that we will never know the truth and that this is still a mystery. What do you think? Was this foul play, or was this a tragic accident that no one could have prevented, even Michelle herself? To me, I want to say that the boat theory is the most likely theory, that maybe they got too close to that pier and didn't realize that she was right there, and then didn't even know as they left her behind. Maybe they dragged her all the way those 10 minutes to where her body was found with no idea what they had done. Or maybe they did know and they covered it up, and technically they did kill her. I also do think it's a very likely theory that her stalker could have been angry for her for going on a date with another man, and I really, really wish that we would have known his name, that there would have been more done, that there would have been reports on stalking. And that's why I think it's so important, even if you fear people don't believe you, even if you don't have a ton of information, to tell people, lots of people, including investigators, even if they think you're crazy, even if they don't believe you, because that could have made such a big difference. And it's not Michelle's fault that she didn't do that. It's not Michelle's fault that she had a stalker, that this stalker could have done something to her, but it would have just made it more concrete that this was not just some accident, that somebody had done something to her. You know, we would have just had more answers, and we wouldn't feel like something went horribly wrong that night that wasn't just a shark. Because to me, I feel that there's something much more here, and I don't think Michelle wanted to die that night, like some said. I don't think that it was a quick death. I don't believe we have all the answers. I also believe there are people out there who know much more than they will ever say. But I wish that wasn't the case. Michelle deserved better than this. She had just overcome such a horrific battle, and she deserved to live her life to the fullest. I'm glad that she did that year. After she was cancer-free, she just went out on her own. She was doing amazing things. She was living the dream of being happy, but it shouldn't have been cut short. So this is the story of Michelle von Emster, and I would love to know what you think happened. Don't ever forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay?